I'm Mildred Bailey, 55 years old, and I never thought I'd be sitting in an Augusta courtroom clutching an envelope that could unravel a decade of lies. My sister stood across from me, her lawyer by her side, accusing me of kidnapping her 4 kids. Kidnapping? The word hit like a slap. 10 years ago, she dropped them at my doorstep, promising just 1 hour, and vanished. I raised those kids, fed them, clothed them, loved them like my own. Now she was back, not for them, but for something else entirely. Her eyes gleamed with greed, and I knew why. A house, our family's house, worth $300,000 was at stake. She thought she could waltz in, point fingers, and take it all. But I wasn't going down without a fight. My hands trembled as I held the envelope packed with proof that would turn her story upside down. The kids, now teenagers, sat behind me, their faces tense but loyal. I'd shielded them from her betrayal for years, but today, the truth was coming out. The judge leaned forward, his voice sharp. "Do they know about this?" he asked, pointing to my envelope. I took a breath, my heart pounding. "Not yet," I said, my voice steady despite the storm inside. The courtroom went silent, every eye on me. What was in that envelope? What had my sister hidden all these years? Stick around, because this fight's just getting started. What would you do if your own family turned against you and accused you after everything you'd done for them? Share your thoughts in the comments. I want to hear your story. 10 years ago, on a rainy afternoon in Augusta, my doorbell rang like a cry for help. I opened the door to find my sister Janet Porter standing there, her face pale and her eyes darting. Behind her were her 4 kids, Ryan Porter, 8, with his backpack sagging, Claire Porter, 6, clutching a stuffed bunny, Esther Porter, 4, her shoes untied, and little Noah Porter, barely 2, whimpering in a stroller. "Mildred, I need you to watch them for an hour," Janet said, her voice sharp, almost desperate. "Just 1 hour, I swear." Before I could ask why, she shoved a diaper bag into my arms and turned away, her coat flapping as she hurried to her car. The engine roared and she was gone. I stood frozen, rain dripping from the porch roof. Ryan looked up at me, his eyes tired and confused. "Where's Mom going?" he asked, his voice small. Claire's bunny was damp, her hair matted from the drizzle. Esther tugged at my sleeve, asking for juice, while Noah's cries grew louder, his tiny fists clenched. They were hungry, their clothes rumpled, and Noah's diaper needed changing. My heart raced. I was a nurse used to emergencies, but this felt different. These were my sister's kids, dropped off like luggage. I brought them inside, settling them on the living room rug. The house smelled of the coffee I'd been brewing, but now it felt too small for 4 kids. I dug through the diaper bag, finding only a few snacks and a spare outfit for Noah. No note, no instructions, just chaos. I gave Esther a granola bar, poured milk for Claire, and tried to soothe Noah, rocking him gently. Ryan sat quietly, staring at the door, waiting for Janet to come back. I grabbed my phone and dialed Janet. No answer. I tried again, voicemail. "Janet, where are you?" I said, keeping my voice steady for the kids. "Call me back." Hours passed and the rain didn't stop. Noah fell asleep in my arms, his cheeks streaked with tears. Claire curled up next to Ryan, whispering, "Is Mom coming soon?" I forced a smile, saying, "She'll be here, sweetheart." But my stomach twisted. Janet had always been impulsive, chasing dreams that never panned out, but this was new. Leaving her kids, I couldn't wrap my head around it. By evening, I'd fed them what I had: peanut butter sandwiches and apples. Ryan helped Esther with her sandwich, acting older than his 8 years. I changed Noah's diaper, wincing at how long he'd been in it. Their clothes were mismatched, like they'd been packed in a rush. I kept calling Janet, leaving messages until her voicemail was full. At midnight, I tucked the kids into my guest bed, Ryan and Claire sharing one side, Esther and Noah curled up together. I sat by the window watching the street, expecting headlights that never came. The next morning, I found a crumpled note in the diaper bag tucked under a pack of wipes. In Janet's messy scrawl, it read, "I'll be back soon. Thanks, Mildred." Soon, my chest tightened. I looked at the kids now eating cereal at my kitchen table. Ryan's eyes were still on the door. Claire clutched her bunny tighter. Esther babbled about a cartoon oblivious. Noah reached for me, his tiny hand warm. I wasn't their mom, but they needed me. I put the note down, my hands shaking. Janet wasn't coming back, not today. Maybe not ever. I took a deep breath, thinking of my job at the hospital, my quiet life in Augusta. I'd never planned for this, but those kids weren't luggage to be tossed aside. I called my friend Betty, asking for advice. "Mildred, you've got a big heart," she said. "Do what you do best, take care of them." I nodded, even though she couldn't see me. I hung up, looking at Ryan, Claire, Esther, and Noah. They were scared, hungry, and alone. I couldn't fix Janet's choices, but I could be there for them. So I decided they'd stay with me no matter what it took. Days turned into weeks, and I knew Janet's soon was a lie. The kids settled into my routine, but I had to adjust everything. I was 45 then, a nurse at Augusta General Hospital, planning to retire early and travel a bit. That dream faded fast. To cover the costs, I picked up night shifts, coming home exhausted but determined. Ryan started asking for breakfast every morning. Claire wanted stories at bedtime. Esther needed playtime, and Noah was always reaching for me. I couldn't say no. First things first, I got them enrolled in school. Ryan and Claire were old enough for local elementary, so I drove to the district office with their birth certificates from Janet's bag. The clerk raised an eyebrow when I explained I was their aunt, but with no other guardian listed, they approved it. Ryan's first day, he clutched my hand walking in, whispering he missed his old school. I knelt down, saying, "This is our new start, Ryan. You'll make friends." Claire skipped ahead, excited for art class. I watched them go, my shift starting in 2 hours. Esther was too young for preschool, so I found a sitter through the hospital network, but Noah stayed with me during days off. Buying school supplies drained my savings, backpacks, notebooks, crayons, but seeing their faces light up made it worth it. Clothes were next. Their outfits from Janet were worn thin, so I took them to the thrift store on Main Street. Ryan picked a blue jacket, Claire a dress with flowers, Esther tiny jeans, and Noah soft onesies. "Do we have money for this?" Ryan asked, his voice hesitant. I ruffled his hair. "We do, kiddo. Family sticks together." At home, I washed everything, folding them neatly. Evenings became our time dinner of spaghetti or chicken nuggets, then homework. Ryan struggled with math, so I sat with him, explaining fractions like I did with patients' meds. Claire drew pictures of our house. Esther built block towers. Noah banged pots like drums. It was chaos, but it was ours. Money became the real fight. My pension was for one person, not 5. Bills piled up: groceries, utilities, the mortgage on our family home, the only big asset left from Mom and Dad. It was a solid brick house on Elm Street worth $300,000, but selling wasn't an option. That place held memories, and it was stability for the kids. I cut back on my own things. No new scrubs, no coffee out. Hospital paychecks stretched thin, so I applied for aid through social services. The caseworker visited, noting how the kids thrived despite everything. "You're doing right by them, Mrs. Bailey," she said. But nights alone, after tucking them in, I stared at the ceiling, wondering if Janet would ever show. The kids asked about her often. Ryan, being the oldest, questioned the most. One night over dinner, he said, "Aunt Mildred, when is Mom coming to pick us up?" I paused, fork midway. "She's working on some things, Ryan. But I'm here now, and we're a team." He nodded, but his eyes said he didn't believe it. Claire was sweeter, drawing cards for Janet during holidays. "Can we send this to her?" she'd ask. I'd smile, mailing them to the last address I had, even if they bounced back. Esther, at 4, was blunt. "Mommy left because I was bad," she once cried after a tantrum. I held her tight. "No, Esther, you're perfect. Sometimes grown-ups need time." Noah, too young to understand, just called me Mama by accident one day, and it broke my heart a little. I never corrected him, hiding the ache behind a hug. Friends helped where they could. Betty Coleman, my old nursing buddy, brought casseroles and watched the little ones when I worked doubles. "You're a Saint Mildred," she'd say, folding laundry. I laughed it off, but inside the weight pressed. Doctor visits added up: Ryan's checkups, Claire's shots, Esther's ear infections, Noah's teething. Insurance covered some, but copays mounted. I dipped into savings for winter coats, birthdays with cake from the store. Ryan's 8th birthday turned 9th without fanfare, just balloons. I blew up myself. He thanked me with a drawing of us all together. Years blurred. Ryan entered middle school, excelling in science like his dad. Claire joined choir, her voice filling the house. Esther started ballet classes I couldn't afford but scraped for. Noah learned to walk, then run, chasing the others. I missed shifts for school events, parent-teacher meetings where I was the only adult. "Where's their mom?" teachers asked. Traveling for work, I'd say, the lie slipping easier each time. The pain never left, though, a sister vanishing, leaving me to fill the gap. But seeing them laugh grow, it kept me going. The house creaked under our steps, a reminder of what we had even if money was tight. One evening, after a long shift, I came home to find Ryan helping Esther with homework. Claire read to Noah. "We made dinner," Aunt Mildred, Ryan said proudly. I sat down, tears pricking. This was my life now, and I wouldn't trade it. But deep down I wondered how long I could keep the truth hidden. But then, after all those years, she returned. A knock on my door brought Janet back, but not alone. I opened it to find Janet standing tall in a tailored blazer, her eyes cold and sharp. Beside her was a man in a crisp suit, introduced as Attorney Stephen Hart. "Mrs. Bailey," he said, handing me a legal notice. "We're here about the children." My stomach dropped. Ryan, now 18, was at the kitchen table doing homework. Claire, 16, was practicing a song for choir. Esther, 14, and Noah, 12, were playing cards in the living room. They froze, hearing the word children. Janet's voice cut through. "I want my kids back, Mildred. You've kept them unlawfully." I stood there, gripping the notice, my mind racing. "Unlawfully," I said, my voice shaking. "Janet, you left them with me for 10 years. She crossed her arms, unfazed. "That's not how I see it. I'm their mother, and I'm taking them." Hart stepped forward, his tone clipped. "We've filed for custody. You'll hear from the court soon." The kids gathered behind me, Ryan's jaw tight, Claire's eyes wide. Esther whispered, "Is she taking us?" I squeezed her hand. "No one's taking you, sweetheart." Noah clung to my side, silent but trembling. Janet didn't even look at them, her gaze fixed on me like I was the enemy. After they left, I sat the kids down. "What's going on, Aunt Mildred?" Ryan asked, his voice steady but worried. I took a deep breath. "Your mom's back, and she's trying to get custody. But we're a family, and I won't let that happen." Claire's lip quivered. Why now? She didn't want us before. I hugged her, no answers ready. Esther and Noah stayed quiet, their card game forgotten. That night, I couldn't sleep, the legal notice burning a hole in my thoughts. Why was Janet doing this? She hadn't called, visited, or sent a single letter in a decade. Then it hit me, the house. Our parents had passed 2 years ago, leaving the family home on Elm Street to me and Janet. It was a sturdy brick house valued at $300,000, the only big asset we had. I'd kept it for the kids, a stable place for them to grow up. Janet, I realized, wasn't after the kids, she was after the house. The legal notice mentioned estate disputes, a clue to her real motive. She thought claiming custody would give her leverage to force a sale or take my share. My blood boiled. She'd abandoned Ryan, Claire, Esther, and Noah, and now she wanted to profit from her absence. I needed proof to fight this. I called Betty Coleman, who'd been with me through those early years. "Janet's back, Betty," I said, my voice low. "She's claiming I stole her kids." Betty snorted. "After she dumped them on you? What's her game?" I explained about the house. "We need to be ready for court," I told her. She promised to help, saying she'd testify about those first days. I hung up, digging through old boxes in the attic. There, tucked in a folder, was the crumpled note Janet left 10 years ago. "I'll be back soon." "Thanks, Mildred." I also found old texts from her vague messages about needing space and money being tight. They showed she'd checked out long before. Then I remembered Eric Larson, Janet's ex-husband. He'd reached out a few years after she left, checking on the kids but staying distant. I found his number in an old contact list and called. "Eric, it's Mildred. Janet's trying to take the kids for the house." He sighed, his voice heavy. "I'm not surprised. She called me last month asking about property laws." He paused, then added, "I have something that might help, a video she sent me years ago admitting she walked away." My heart raced. "Can you send it?" I asked. He agreed, promising to bring it if needed. The video, he said, showed Janet laughing about leaving the kids to live her life. With the note texts and Eric's video, I felt a spark of hope. But the pressure was crushing. The kids were shaken. Ryan stayed up late researching custody laws. Claire stopped singing. Esther drew angry sketches, and Noah asked if he'd have to leave. I reassured them, "We're staying together no matter what." I met with a lawyer recommended by the hospital, a kind woman who reviewed my evidence. "You've got a strong case, Mrs. Bailey," she said, "but court's unpredictable. Be ready for a fight." I nodded, my resolve hardening. Every night I checked on the kids as they slept, their faces peaceful in our home. Ryan's college application sat on his desk. Claire's choir ribbons lined her wall. Esther's ballet shoes hung by the door. Noah's soccer ball rested in the corner. This was their life, our life, built from scratch after Janet walked away. I wasn't perfect, but I'd given them everything I had. Now, facing her in court, I'd do whatever it took to protect them. The house wasn't just bricks, it was their safety, their memories. Janet wouldn't take that away. The courtroom was waiting for us. In the Augusta courthouse, I gripped my envelope, ready to fight for the truth. The courtroom smelled of polished wood, its benches filled with a few locals whispering. I sat with Ryan, Claire, Esther, and Noah behind me, their faces tense but trusting. My lawyer, Ms. Thompson, nodded reassuringly. Across the aisle, Janet sat with her attorney, Stephen Hart, both looking polished and confident. The bailiff called, "All rise," and Judge Charles Lane, a stern man with gray hair, took his seat. "We're here to address the custody of 4 minors," he said, his voice steady. "Mrs. Porter claims Mrs. Bailey has kept them unlawfully." Hart stood, adjusting his tie. "Your Honor, my client, Mrs. Janet Porter, is the biological mother of Ryan, Claire, Esther, and Noah Porter. For 10 years, Mrs. Bailey has denied her access, holding the children without legal guardianship. We seek immediate custody and a review of estate matters tied to their care." Janet leaned forward, her expression calm but calculated, avoiding the kids' eyes. I clenched the envelope tighter, my pulse racing. Ms. Thompson whispered, "Stay calm, Mildred. We've got this." I nodded, but the weight of Janet's accusation felt like a blade. Hart called Janet to speak. She stood, smoothing her skirt. "I left my children temporarily due to personal challenges," she said, her voice soft but rehearsed. "I always intended to return, but my sister refused to let me see them. I'm their mother and I want them back." The room stirred, a few gasps from the back. Judge Lane's face stayed neutral, but his eyes narrowed. "Mrs. Porter, you're saying you were denied access for a decade?" he asked. Janet nodded, a tear glistening, too perfect, I thought. Ms. Thompson stood. "Your Honor, may I present evidence?" Judge Lane nodded. I handed her the envelope, my hand steady despite the nerves. She held up the note from 10 years ago, its edges worn but words clear. "This is a handwritten note from Mrs. Porter, left with the children in 2015. Ms. Thompson said, reading aloud, 'I'll be back soon. Thanks, Mildred.' Mrs. Porter never returned." She passed the note to the bailiff, who handed it to the judge. Janet shifted her composure, slipping. Hart whispered to her, his face tight. Next, Ms. Thompson displayed text messages on a screen pulled from my old phone. "These texts from 2015 to 2016 show Mrs. Porter demanding money from Mrs. Bailey," she said. One read, "Send me $500, Mildred. I'm sorting things out." Another, "I need cash, not questions. The courtroom buzzed. These messages, Ms. Thompson continued, prove Mrs. Porter abandoned her children and only contacted Mrs. Bailey for financial gain, not to check on them. Janet's face reddened and she looked away. I caught Ryan's eye. He gave a small nod, his trust unwavering. Judge Lane leaned forward. Mrs. Bailey, did you attempt to contact Mrs. Porter? I stood my voice firm. Yes, Your Honor. I called her repeatedly after she left the kids. Her phone went to voicemail, then got disconnected. I mailed letters to her last address, but they came back. I raised Ryan, Claire, Esther, and Noah as my own because my sister left them with nothing. The judge jotted notes, his pen scratching loudly in the quiet room. Hart objected, saying Mrs. Bailey's claims lack proof of intent. Ms. Thompson countered the note, and texts show clear abandonment. Then the judge turned to the kids. I'd like to hear from the children, he said. Ryan, now 18, stood first, his voice steady. Aunt Mildred's been our mom for 10 years, he said. She worked nights, paid for school, everything. Our real mom left us and never called. Claire, 16, went next, her hands trembling. I don't want to go with her, she said, glancing at Janet. Aunt Mildred's our family. Esther, 14, spoke softly but firmly. She was never there. Aunt Mildred loves us. Noah, 12, clutched my hand before speaking. I only know Aunt Mildred. She's my home. The room went silent, their words hanging heavy. I fought back tears, squeezing Noah's shoulder. Janet's face twisted, but she didn't respond. Hart whispered to her again, his gestures sharp. The locals in the back murmured, some shaking their heads. Judge Lane looked at the kids, then at me. These are compelling statements, he said. But the accusation of unlawful custody is serious. Mrs. Bailey. Your evidence shows a pattern, but it's not conclusive. Mrs. Porter's claim of denied access needs addressing. He paused, tapping his pen. Do you have anything else to substantiate your position, Mrs. Bailey? I froze, my mind racing. The note and texts were strong, but Janet's story of being denied was still hanging. Ms. Thompson leaned in. We have more, Your Honor, but we need a moment to prepare it. The judge nodded. I'll allow it, but I need something definitive to resolve this. The room felt like it was closing in the air, thick with tension. Janet smirked slightly, as if sensing a chance. Ryan grabbed my hand, whispering, You've got this, Aunt Mildred. I nodded, but my heart pounded. We needed something stronger to end this. Just when I thought we'd said enough, a familiar face walked into the courtroom. Eric Larson, Janet's ex-husband, stepped through the doors, his face weathered but resolute. He carried a small USB drive, his eyes locking with mine for a moment before he approached Ms. Thompson. The room buzzed, heads turning. Janet froze, her hands gripping the table. Stephen Hart leaned toward her, whispering urgently, but her gaze stayed on Eric. Your Honor. Ms. Thompson said, standing quickly, we have a new witness, and additional evidence. Judge Charles Lane raised an eyebrow, adjusting his glasses. Proceed, he said, his tone curious but firm. Eric took the stand, swearing in with a steady voice. I'm Eric Larson, he said, formerly married to Mrs. Janet Porter. I have a video she sent me years ago relevant to this case. The bailiff set up a screen and Ms. Thompson inserted the USB. My heart pounded as the video played. Janet's face appeared younger, her hair loose, sitting in what looked like a dimly lit bar. I'm done with the kids, she said, laughing lightly. 4 kids. Too much. I'm starting over with someone new, someone who gets me. Mildred can deal with them. She sipped a drink, then added, I just need money to move on. The video cut off, and the courtroom erupted in murmurs. Ryan gripped my hand, his face pale. Claire's eyes widened, and Esther whispered, That's Mom. Noah looked down, silent. I leaned toward Ms. Thompson, my voice low. Do they know about this? I asked, nodding toward the kids. The question had haunted me since I first heard about the video in our call with Eric. It was the truth I'd shielded them from, their mother's callous words, her choice to walk away, for someone else, for money. Ms. Thompson shook her head slightly. Not yet, she whispered. But they're hearing it now. My chest tightened. I'd spent 10 years protecting Ryan, Claire, Esther, and Noah from this pain, telling them their mom was figuring things out. Now they faced her betrayal in a courtroom surrounded by strangers. Judge Lane banged his gavel, silencing the room. "Mrs. Porter," he said, his voice sharp. "Do you have an explanation for this?" Janet stood, her face flushed, her hands trembling. "That was years ago," she stammered. "I was in a bad place, Your Honor. I didn't mean it. I was young, overwhelmed. I always planned to come back for my kids." Her voice cracked, but it sounded hollow, like a script she couldn't sell. Hart tried to interject, saying, "Your Honor, this video lacks context," but Judge Lane cut him off. "I've heard enough from you for now, Mr. Hart. Mrs. Porter, you claimed Mrs. Bailey denied you access. This video suggests otherwise." The locals in the back whispered loudly, some shaking their heads. Ryan squeezed my hand tighter, his voice barely audible. "She didn't want us," he said, not a question, but a realization. I pulled him close, whispering, "You've got me always." Claire's eyes were wet, her choir ribbon pinned to her jacket, a reminder of the life we'd built. Esther stared at the floor, her usual spark gone. Noah, still clutching my sleeve, looked confused, too young to fully grasp the words, but old enough to feel their weight. I wanted to shield them, to take them home and erase this moment, but the truth was out, raw and undeniable. Ms. Thompson pressed forward. "Your Honor, this video, combined with the note and texts presented earlier, shows Mrs. Porter's clear intent to abandon her children. Mrs. Bailey stepped in, raising them for a decade without support." She gestured to the kids. "Their statements confirm they see Mrs. Bailey as their guardian, their family." Judge Lane nodded, his expression unreadable, scribbling notes. "This is significant," he said, "but I need to consider the full context. Mr. Hart, do you have a response?" Hart stood, his voice strained. "My client was under duress when that video was made. She's since stabilized and wants to reconnect with her children." Janet nodded, her eyes darting to the kids for the first time. "I've changed," she said, her voice softer. "I'm ready to be their mom again." But her words fell flat. Claire shook her head, whispering to Esther, who crossed her arms. Noah leaned closer to me, and Ryan's jaw tightened. The room felt electric, the tension palpable as the locals murmured louder, some glaring at Janet. Judge Lane raised a hand for silence. "This video raises serious questions about Mrs. Porter's claims," he said. "It suggests a willful decision to leave, not a temporary absence. But I'll need time to review all evidence." He looked at me, then the kids. "Mrs. Bailey, you've shown dedication, but this case isn't closed." My heart sank, but I nodded, holding Noah's hand. The kids' faces, their trust in me, fueled my resolve. Janet's eyes met mine, a flicker of guilt there, but it wasn't enough. The truth was out, and it had shaken her. The judge's gavel was about to fall. Judge Lane's voice cut through the tension, his decision clear and final. After reviewing the evidence and statements, he said, his eyes sweeping the courtroom, "I find Mrs. Janet Porter's claim of denied access unfounded. The note, texts, and video demonstrate a clear intent to abandon her children. Mrs. Mildred Bailey has provided a stable home for Ryan, Claire, Esther, and Noah for 10 years. I grant full guardianship to Mrs. Bailey." The gavel struck, echoing like a heartbeat. He continued, "Mrs. Porter is issued a 7-year restraining order barring contact with the children without court approval." The room exhaled, murmurs rippling through the locals on the benches. I sat, frozen, relief flooding me. Ryan grabbed my hand, his grip strong. Claire let out a soft sob, leaning into Esther, who smiled faintly. Noah nestled against me, whispered, "We're staying with you." I nodded, pulling him close. "Always, kiddo." Across the aisle, Janet slumped, her face pale. Stephen Hart packed his briefcase, his movements sharp, avoiding her eyes. The locals whispered, some nodding in approval, others staring at Janet with pity or judgment. Judge Lane's words hung heavy. Guardianship was mine, the kids were safe, and the house on Elm Street remained ours. Janet's defeat went beyond the courtroom. Word spread in Augusta that she'd been chasing the family home valued at $300,000 to fund her lifestyle. After the ruling, her plans unraveled. Hart's legal fees piled high from her insistence on a flashy defense left her drowning in debt. I heard from Betty Coleman later that Janet had been living extravagantly, renting a condo in Portland, driving a leased car she couldn't afford. Without the house, her financial house of cards collapsed. She moved to a small apartment, her dreams of reclaiming wealth gone. I didn't wish her pain, but her choices had carved this path. The victory felt heavy. I'd won, but at what cost? Janet was my sister, once my closest confidant. We'd shared secrets as kids laughed over late-night talks. Now she was a stranger, her betrayal cutting deeper than any courtroom loss could. As we left the courthouse, I glanced back. Janet stood alone, her shoulders hunched, staring at the floor. I wanted to feel anger, but all I felt was sorrow for the sister I'd lost, for the family we could have been. I turned away, guiding the kids through the double doors into the crisp Maine air. At home, the house felt warmer, like it was breathing again. Ryan sat at the kitchen table, his college application spread out. "You fought for us, Aunt Mildred," he said, his voice steady. "You're our real mom." My throat tightened. Claire hugged me, her choir ribbon pinned to her shirt. "I was scared we'd lose you," she admitted. Esther joined in, her usual spark back. "You're stuck with us," she teased, grinning. Noah wrapped his arms around my waist, his voice muffled. "I love you, Mom." He'd called me that before, but this time it felt permanent. I hugged them all, tears blurring my vision, their warmth anchoring me. We sat together that night, eating pizza on the living room floor, the old brick house creaking around us. The kids laughed, telling stories, Ryan about his science project, Claire about a new song, Esther about ballet, Noah about soccer. It was ordinary, but it was everything. The house, our home, stood firm, its walls holding a decade of memories. I thought of Janet somewhere out there, facing her debts and regrets. I didn't hate her, but I couldn't forgive her either. She'd chosen her path, and I'd chosen mine. Betty stopped by the next day, bringing her famous casserole. "You did it, Mildred," she said, squeezing my hand. "Those kids are lucky to have you." I smiled, but my heart still carried the weight of Janet's absence. I'd raised her children, loved them as my own, but the fracture in our family lingered. I looked at the kids playing in the yard, their laughter echoing. They were my purpose, my reason to keep going. The house, the guardianship, the fight, it was all for them. As I tucked Noah into bed that night, he looked up at me. "Will she come back?" he asked, his eyes searching. I brushed his hair back. "If she does, we'll be ready. But we're together, and that's what matters." He nodded, drifting off. I stood in the doorway, watching them all sleep, their futures safe in my hands. The fight was over, but the love would last forever. 3 months after the hearing, I watched the kids play in our Augusta backyard. The late summer sun cast long shadows and laughter filled the air. Ryan tossed a frisbee to Noah, who darted across the grass, his soccer skills showing. Esther practiced a ballet spin near the oak tree, her confidence growing. The old brick house on Elm Street stood behind us, a quiet anchor for our family. I leaned against the fence, my heart full, watching the life we'd fought to keep. Ryan had just been accepted to the University of Maine, studying biology, his dream since he was a kid. He'd spent evenings poring over applications, his determination a mirror of my own. Claire was excelling in school, her grades soaring, her voice a standout in the choir. Esther had joined the school dance team, her energy lighting up every routine. Noah was the star of his soccer league, his shy smile brighter each day. Their lives were moving forward, rooted in the stability we'd built. The house, once a point of contention, was now just home, its value irrelevant compared to their happiness. Across town, Janet's life had taken a different turn. I heard through a mutual acquaintance that she'd moved to a cramped apartment in Waterville, working a low-paying sales job at a local store. Her once glamorous life-fancy dinners, new clothes had faded. The legal battle's costs had drained her, and friends who'd once flocked to her parties now kept their distance. She lived alone, her choices isolating her. I didn't gloat. Her loneliness was a consequence she'd earned. Still, the thought of my sister, once so vibrant, now adrift, left a hollow ache. I'd thought about reaching out, wondering if we could mend what was broken. But every time I considered it, I saw the kids' faces. Ryan's quiet strength, Claire's tearful relief, Esther's fierce loyalty, Noah's trusting hug. Janet had abandoned them, chasing money and freedom over family. I couldn't forgive that, not yet. Responsibility wasn't something you could buy back with apologies or tears. I'd chosen to protect the kids, to give them a mother's love when she wouldn't. That choice defined us, and I stood by it. Looking back, the fight taught me something profound. Selfish actions like Janet's ripple outward, leaving real consequences: broken bonds, empty wallets, lonely nights. But justice, when it works, protects what matters: love, duty, the promises we keep. I'd spent 10 years keeping those promises, waking early, working late, cheering at games, and wiping tears. The kids were my proof that love could outlast betrayal. They called me Mom now, not out of obligation, but because we'd built something unbreakable. That evening, we gathered in the living room, the kids sprawled on the couch. Ryan showed me his college packing list. Claire sang a new melody, Esther sketched a dance routine, and Noah told me about a goal he'd scored. I listened, my heart steady. The house creaked softly, as if agreeing we'd done all right. Janet's absence was a shadow, but it no longer loomed. We'd faced her in court, faced the truth, and come out stronger. As I tucked Noah into bed, he looked up. "We're okay now, right?" "Mom," I smiled, brushing his hair back. "Better than okay, kid." I closed his door, glancing at the others' rooms: Ryan's books, Claire's ribbons, Esther's ballet shoes. This was our life, hard-won but ours. The lesson was clear. You reap what you sow, and love, when given freely, grows stronger than any court ruling. We were a family, and that was enough.